The space station called Horizon's Rest floated in the darkness between three solar systems. It was old, built long before humans ever left Earth, and it showed its age in the rust-colored walls and flickering lights. But it was also alive with movement. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds walked through its wide corridors every day. They came to trade, to eat, to hide, and sometimes to fight. Walked through the crowded market with his hands in his pockets. He was 28 years old, average height, with black hair that fell across his forehead and tired eyes that had seen too many stars. He wore the simple gray uniform of a cargo hauler, stained with oil and dust from 100 different planets. Nothing about him stood out. Nothing about him demanded attention. That was exactly how he wanted it. He had been working the outer rim routes for 3 years now, loading cargo, unloading cargo, sleeping in his small ship, eating cheap food. It was a simple life, a quiet life, and he had learned to love it. The galaxy was full of danger, full of beings who were faster, stronger, and deadlier than any human. The smart thing was to stay invisible. The smart thing was to never make trouble. Stopped at a small food stand run by an elderly woman named. She was Korean like him, one of the few humans who lived permanently on the station. Her restaurant was nothing special, just a counter and a few stools, but she made the best noodles outside of Earth. The smell of her cooking reminded of home, of his grandmother's kitchen, of a life he had left behind long ago. "The usual?" asked, already reaching for a bowl. "Please," said, sitting down on a worn metal stool. The market buzzed around them. A group of tall, blue-skinned traders argued over the price of engine parts. A small creature with too many eyes sold jewelry made from asteroid crystals. 2 security officers walked past, their armor scratched and dented from years of service. It was a normal day on Horizon's Rest. Then the crowd began to move. Looked up from his noodles. People were pushing against each other, trying to get out of the way. Shop owners were closing their stalls. The noise of the market dropped to whispers. Something was coming. He saw them a moment later. A group of warriors walking through the center of the corridor like they owned it. They were a species known throughout the galaxy for their strength and speed. Their skin was covered in black scales that shone like polished stone. They had 4 arms each, and their golden eyes scanned the crowd with cold interest. But it was the one in the middle who drew every eye. He was taller than the others, nearly 8 feet, and his scales were darker, almost purple in the station's light. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged, never been threatened, never been afraid. Gold rings hung from his pointed ears, and a long red cape flowed behind him. His forearms were thick with muscle, and scars covered his knuckles like medals. "Who is that?" asked quietly. His face had gone pale. "That is Grand Champion, the untouchable one." Had heard the name before. Everyone in the galaxy had heard the name. Was a legend, a fighter who had won 847 matches in the formal combat arenas. But that was not what made him famous. What made him famous was that in all those fights across all those years, no opponent had ever touched him. Not once. Not a single blow had ever landed on his body. His speed was beyond anything other species could match. His reflexes were said to be perfect. He saw attacks before they happened and moved before they arrived. He was called untouchable because that was exactly what he was. Walked through the market like a king walking through his kingdom. His guards spread out around him, stopping at each shop and stall. They did not ask. They simply held out their hands and waited. The shop owners gave them money, goods, whatever they wanted. No one argued. No one complained. No one was stupid enough to challenge the champion's collection. Watched this with growing anger. He knew how the galaxy worked. The strong took from the weak. That was the way of things. But knowing something and accepting something were not the same. The guards reached a small restaurant. "Payment," one of them said, holding out a scaled hand. 50 credits, protection fee." His hands shook as she reached for her money box. Could see that it was nearly empty. Business had been slow. The 50 credits she had saved were meant for supplies, for food, for survival. I don't have 50, said quietly. I have 30. Please, I can pay the rest next week. The guard laughed. It was an ugly sound. 30 is not 50, human. Perhaps we take your equipment instead. That cooking surface looks valuable. Please, begged. Please, I need it. Without it, I have nothing. Set down his chopsticks. The sound they made against the counter was very small, but somehow it cut through the noise of the market. The guard turned to look at him. She doesn't have that kind of money, said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Leave her alone. For a moment, nobody moved. The guard stared at like he was looking at an insect that had suddenly started talking. Then he laughed again, louder this time. Does the cargo rat have something to say? Stood up slowly. He was shorter than the guard by more than a foot. He was thinner. He had no weapons, no armor, no scales. He looked exactly like what he was, a tired human worker who should have known better than to open his mouth. But he did not sit back down. I said leave her alone. The commotion drew attention. Other guards turned to look. Shop owners peeked out from behind their stalls. And then, like a shadow falling over the world, himself walked over to see what was happening. The champion looked down with golden eyes that held nothing but amusement. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His scales seemed to drink in the light. His 4 arms hung relaxed at his sides, but could see the power in them, the coiled strength waiting to be released. What is this? Asked. His voice was deep, like stones grinding together. This human spoke against us, champion, the guard reported. He defended the old female. Tilted his massive head. A human speaking against me. He leaned down, bringing his face close to us. His breath smelled like copper and smoke. Do you know who I am, little creature? I know who you are, said. And yet you speak. She's done nothing wrong. She can't pay what she doesn't have. Find your tribute somewhere else. The market had gone completely silent now. Every eye was on them. Could feel the weight of those stares, could feel the disbelief and the pity. Everyone was thinking the same thing. This human is going to die. Straightened up, a smile spread across his face, showing rows of sharp teeth. You have courage, small one. Stupid courage, but courage. Tell me, do you know what happens to those who interfere with a champion's collection? New, by galactic law, anyone who interfered could be challenged to formal combat. It was an old rule, meant to discourage exactly this kind of situation. And formal combat with a champion meant only one thing. Death. I know, said. Smile grew wider. Then you know what comes next. He raised his voice so that everyone in the market could hear. I, Grand Champion, challenge this human to formal combat 3 days from now, in the arena. The crowd gasped, Grab's arm, her eyes filled with tears. No, she whispered. No, you cannot. But it was already done. The challenge had been issued in public according to the old laws. There was no taking it back. There was no running away. Leaned close one more time. I hope you enjoy your last 3 days, human. I will try to make your death quick. I am, after all, merciful. Then he turned and walked away, his guards following behind him, leaving standing alone in the silent market with the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his shoulders. The news spread through Horizon's Rest like fire through dry grass. Within an hour, every being on the station knew about the challenge. Within 2 hours, betting screens appeared on every corner. The odds were not kind to 10,000 to 1 against him surviving the first 10 seconds, 20,000 to 1 against him lasting a full minute. No one, not a single gambler in the entire station, was willing to bet on him winning. Sat in his small cargo ship, staring at the metal wall across from his bunk. The ship was old and cramped, barely big enough for one person to live in. But it was his. He had bought it with 3 years of savings, 3 years of loading boxes and flying dangerous routes. It was the only thing in the galaxy that belonged to him. The door opened and climbed inside. He was the same age as, with a round face and worried eyes. They had worked together for 2 years, flying the same routes, sharing meals, watching each other's backs. Was not a fighter. He was not brave, but he was loyal, and right now his loyalty was breaking his heart. "You need to run," said, sitting down across from his friend. "There's a transport leaving for the outer territories in 4 hours. I already talked to the captain. He'll take you. No questions asked." Shook his head slowly. "If I run, they'll punish everyone who helped me. You, everyone I've ever spoken to on this station. That's how champions work. That's how they keep people afraid." "Then let them punish me." His voice cracked. "I don't care. You can't fight him. You're not a fighter. You're a cargo pilot. You move boxes for a living. That thing out there has killed hundreds of warriors. Real warriors, beings with armor and claws and weapons. What are you going to do? Hit him with a shipping container?" Was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at his friend, and there was something in his eyes that had never seen before. Something old. Something sharp. "I was a cargo pilot," said quietly. "But before that I was something else." He stood up and opened a small storage compartment above his bunk. Inside, buried under old clothes and spare parts, was a wooden box. Pulled it out and set it on the floor between them. The wood was dark with age, carved with symbols that did not recognize. "What is that?" asked. Opened the box. Inside were old photographs, yellowed with time, a small medal on a faded ribbon, a piece of cloth that might once have been white, and at the bottom, wrapped in silk, a pair of hand wraps made from worn leather. "My grandfather taught me to fight," said, picking up one of the photographs. It showed a young boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, standing next to an old man with a kind face. They were both wearing white uniforms, standing in front of a small building near the ocean. "He started training me when I was a child, every day before school, after school, on weekends. He said that fighting was not about being strong. It was about understanding yourself, understanding your enemy, understanding the space between you." Looked at the photograph, then back at his friend. "You never told me this." "I don't talk about it," set the photograph down. "I trained for 15 years. I competed in tournaments across Korea, across Asia, across the world. I was good, really good. People said I might be the best of my generation." "What happened?" His face darkened. "Powerful people happened. Gamblers, crime lords. They wanted me to lose a fight on purpose. They had bet a lot of money against me. When I refused, they destroyed my life. They spread lies about me. They made sure no one would ever let me compete again. They threatened my family, so I left Earth. I ran as far as I could run. I became a cargo pilot, and I tried to forget everything my grandfather taught me." Stared at him. "You've been hiding this for 3 years. You've been pretending to be nobody." "I am nobody." Picked up the hand wraps, running his fingers over the old leather. "I haven't fought in 5 years. I haven't trained. I've done nothing but lift boxes and fly ships. Whatever I was before, I'm not that person anymore." "But you were good." "I was good against humans." Set the wraps down. "Is not human. He's faster than anything I've ever seen. He's stronger than any 10 humans put together. He has 4 arms, 4. How do you even begin to fight something like that?" Grabbed his friend's shoulders. "Then don't fight, please. I don't want to watch you die. Run away, hide, live." Looked at his friend for a long moment. Then he gently removed his hands and stood up. He walked to the small window of his ship and looked out at the stars. "My grandfather told me something once," he said quietly. "He said that there are 2 kinds of people in the world. There are people who look away when they see injustice because looking away is easier. And there are people who cannot look away, no matter how much they want to. He said the second kind of people usually die young." Turned back to face his friend. "But they die knowing exactly who they are." "This is crazy," whispered. "Maybe," picked up the hand wraps again. "But reminds me of my grandmother. She came all the way out here to the edge of nowhere just to make noodles for people who are far from home. She's kind. She's gentle. She doesn't deserve to have everything taken from her by some monster who thinks strength is the only thing that matters. He began to wrap the leather strips around his hands, slowly, carefully, the way his grandfather had taught him 20 years ago. The movements came back to him like an old song, familiar even after all this time. "I might die in that arena," said. "I probably will, has never been touched. 847 fights and not a single opponent has ever landed a blow. His speed is supposed to be impossible. His reflexes are supposed to be perfect." He finished wrapping his hands and made a fist, feeling the leather tighten against his skin. "But my grandfather also taught me something else. He taught me that speed is not everything. Strength is not everything. The fastest opponent can still be read. The strongest opponent can still be broken. You just have to understand them." Shook his head. "You really believe that?" "I have to believe something," looked at his wrapped hands. "Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" For the next 3 days, trained. He pushed his body until his muscles screamed. He practiced movements he had not made in years. He remembered techniques his grandfather had drilled into him 1,000 times. He did not sleep. He did not eat much. He spent every moment preparing for a fight he knew he would probably lose. But somewhere in those 3 days, something changed inside him. The tired cargo pilot began to fade away. The man who had been running for 5 years stopped running, and in his place, something older woke up, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. On the morning of the fight, came to his ship one last time. "The whole station is watching," he said. 50,000 people are going to be in that arena. Every screen on every planet in this sector is showing the fight. They're calling it the greatest mismatch in combat history." Stood up. He was wearing simple clothes, just a white shirt and loose pants. No armor, no weapons, nothing but the old leather wraps around his hands. "Good," he said quietly. "Let them watch." "Please." Put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "If I don't come back, take care of for me. Make sure nobody hurts her." Then he walked past, out of his ship, and toward the arena where the untouchable champion was waiting. The arena was a massive dome at the heart of Horizon's Rest. It had been built centuries ago, before humans had ever traveled to the stars, and it had seen thousands of battles. The walls were with old damage. The floor was stained with colors that did not come from any paint. The air smelled like metal and sweat and fear. 50,000 beings filled the seats. They had come from every corner of the station, from every species that walked its corridors. Some had come to see history. Some had come to see blood. Most had come simply because they could not look away from what was about to happen. The giant screens above the arena showed the betting odds one final time, 12,000 to 1 against the human. The announcers, speaking in a dozen different languages, reminded the audience of his record: 847 victories, 0 touches. They showed clips from his previous fights, each one ending in seconds, each opponent broken before they could even raise their arms to defend themselves. Then the lights dimmed, and a massive door opened on the far side of the arena. Entered like a god coming down from heaven. His scales gleamed under the spotlights. His red cape flowed behind him like a river of blood. Gold rings sparkled on his ears, and his 4 arms spread wide as the crowd erupted in cheers. He walked to the center of the arena and raised his fists, showing off the scars that covered his knuckles, each one a memory of someone he had destroyed. "I am," he roared, his voice filling every corner of the dome, "the untouchable, the undefeated, the greatest warrior in the galaxy. Today I add another victory to my legend. Today I crush the human who dared to speak against me." The crowd screamed his name. Banners waved. Music thundered from hidden speakers. It was a celebration of power, a worship of strength, and stood at its center like a king receiving tribute. Then on the other side of the arena, a smaller door opened. Walked out alone. There was no music for him, no banners, no cheers. The crowd fell silent as they watched the human walk toward the center of the arena. He looked so small compared to, so fragile. His white shirt hung loose on his thin frame. His simple pants had holes in the knees. The only things that seemed new were the old leather wraps around his hands. Some people in the crowd laughed. Others shook their heads in pity. A few looked away, unable to watch what was about to happen. Stopped 10 feet from and looked up at the champion. He did not speak. He did not bow. He simply stood there, his eyes moving slowly over his opponent's body, reading the way he held himself, the way he breathed, the way his muscles tensed and relaxed. Laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. Look at you, so small, so weak. Do you have any last words, human? Any final message for your pathetic species? Said nothing. His eyes continued to move. No, shrugged his massive shoulders. Then let us begin. I will try to make this quick. I am, after all, merciful. The referee, a small creature in official robes, raised a flag above his head. This is formal combat under galactic law. The fight continues until one combatant yields, is rendered unable to continue, or dies. There are no weapons. There are no time limits. There is no mercy unless it is offered. The flag came down. Begin. Moved. It was like watching lightning strike. One moment he was standing still. The next moment, all 4 of his arms were coming at from different angles, faster than any normal eye could follow. His fists cut through the air with enough force to shatter bone, to crush metal, to end the fight in a single second. The crowd held its breath. His fists found empty air. Was not where he had been standing. He had moved, but not backward, not away. He had stepped forward, inside reach, inside the arc of those deadly arms. He was so close now that he could smell the champion's breath, could see the surprise beginning to form in those golden eyes. Then struck. His palm hits throat. Not hard, not with maximum force, but precisely, exactly where the scales were thinnest, exactly where the nerve clusters lay just beneath the surface. His eyes went wide. His elbow came up, driving into the joint beneath his upper left arm. His knee struck the inside of the champion's leg, targeting the connection point where the muscles met the bone. His fist drove into his stomach, just below the ribs, where 4 different organs pressed against each other. And finally, his open hand cracked across his face in a slap that echoed through the silent arena. 5 blows, less than 2 seconds. Stumbled backward. For the first time in 847 fights, for the first time in his entire legendary career, someone had touched him. Not just once, 5 times, and he had not even seen it happen. The arena was absolutely silent. 50,000 beings sat frozen in their seats, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. The announcers had stopped speaking. The screens showed replays of the moment, slowing it down, showing movements frame by frame, and still it was almost too fast to follow. Touched his face where the slap had landed. His hand came away with a tiny drop of blood, purple blood, the color of royalty. "What?" he whispered. "What are you?" Stood in his fighting stance, weight balanced perfectly, hands raised in a guard position his grandfather had taught him when he was 6 years old. He was breathing slowly, calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. "You rely on speed," said. His voice was quiet but clear. "You've spent your whole life being faster than everyone else. You attack with all 4 arms at once because no one can track that many movements. But that's your weakness. You've never had to be unpredictable. You've never had to hide your intentions. When you attack, every muscle in your body tells me exactly where your strikes will go." Stared at him. You read me. "I don't react to movement. I react to intention. By the time your arms started swinging, I already knew where they would be," tilted his head slightly. "My grandfather taught me that speed is nothing without deception, and you, champion, have never learned to deceive." The crowd began to murmur. The screens showed the replay again and again. The announcers finally found their voices, screaming about the impossible thing they had just witnessed. The untouchable had been touched. The undefeated was bleeding. Surprise slowly transformed into rage. His scales darkened, his golden eyes narrowed, and a deep growl built in his chest. "A trick," he snarled. "A lucky trick, but luck does not last, human. Now I know you are not completely helpless. Now I will stop playing games." He moved again, faster this time, much faster. His four arms became a blur of death, striking from every angle, every direction. He had spent 200 years perfecting his combat style. He had killed warriors who could dodge bullets, who could see in slow motion, who had trained since birth to fight. Flowed around him like water around stone. He did not block. He redirected. A strike that should have taken his head off slid past his shoulder as he turned his body at the last possible moment. A fist that should have crushed his ribs missed by inches as he stepped into a space had not expected him to use. A kick that should have broken his spine found only air as dropped into a roll and came up behind the champion. And with every dodge he struck back. Small hits, precise hits, each one targeting a nerve, a joint, a pressure point. None of them were powerful enough to end the fight, but they were adding up, one by one, turning the untouchable champion's perfect body into a map of small pains. The crowd was on its feet now. They were screaming, but not for the first time in anyone's memory, they were cheering for his opponent. They were cheering for the human. The fight had been going on for 5 minutes now. In the history of his career, no fight had ever lasted more than 40 seconds. But here, in front of 50,000 screaming witnesses, the human was still standing. More than standing, he was winning. In the viewing rooms above the arena, scientists and military officers from a dozen species watched with growing disbelief. They had come expecting to see a quick execution. Instead, they were seeing something that would change the way the galaxy thought about humans forever. Doctor sat at a console in one of the observation booths, her fingers flying over the controls as she analyzed the fight. She was a scientist who studied alien species, and she had spent 20 years researching humans. Most species thought humans were one of the weakest races in the galaxy. No natural weapons, no armor, average strength, slow reflexes. They were considered barely worth studying. Had always suspected there was more to them than that. Now she was watching proof. "Remarkable," she whispered, zooming in on his movements. "His prediction accuracy is over 90%. He's not reacting to attacks, he's anticipating them. Reading the micro-movements in the champion's muscles, the direction of his eyes, the angle of his shoulders. He knows where every strike will land before it begins." A military officer standing behind her leaned forward. "How is that possible? Reaction times are 3 times faster than human reaction times." "That's exactly the point." Pulled up a diagram of the human brain. Humans evolved as persistence predators on Earth. They didn't need to be fast. They needed to be smart. Their brains are designed for pattern recognition on a level most species can't match. They can take tiny pieces of information, things other species wouldn't even notice, and build a complete picture of what's about to happen. She pointed at the screen where was sliding past another of his devastating combinations. "He's not faster than the champion. He doesn't need to be. He starts moving before the attack begins. 2, it must look like magic, but it's not magic. It's 10,000 years of human evolution combined with years of specialized training." Down in the arena, was beginning to understand that something was very wrong. He had never felt this before. Frustration, confusion. His body was not responding the way it should. Every time he struck, his fists found nothing but air. Every time he tried to grab the human, his opponent slipped away like smoke. And those small strikes kept coming, again and again, each one sending a little spike of pain through his nervous system. "Stand still," roared. "Stop running and fight." Said nothing. He continued to move, continued to flow, continued to make the untouchable champion look foolish in front of the entire galaxy. His rage exploded. He threw everything he had into a single massive attack, all four arms swinging in a pattern that had killed 100 opponents, a pattern that should have been impossible to escape. Dove between two of the strikes, rolled under a third, and came up inside's guard. His fist drove into the champion's kidney. His elbow cracked against the nerve cluster in its neck. His knee found the same spot on the leg he had hit before, and this time there was a sound like something tearing. Screamed. For the first time in his career, he screamed in pain. But he was not finished. His lower right arm, the one had not been watching, came around in a devastating backhand. The human saw it too late. He tried to move, tried to dodge, but the arm was already there. The impact sent flying across the arena. He hit the ground hard, rolled 3 times, and lay still. The crowd gasped. The announcers began speaking rapidly, already declaring the fight over. Straightened up, blood dripping from a dozen small wounds, and allowed himself a grim smile. "Finally," he said, "that was a good effort, human, better than anyone expected, but in the end strength always wins." He began walking towards still form, ready to deliver the killing blow. And then moved. It was slow at first. His fingers twitched. His head lifted. He placed one hand on the ground and pushed himself up bit by bit until he was kneeling. Blood ran from his lip. His left arm hung at an awkward angle. His body shook with the effort of staying conscious. But he stood up. The arena fell silent again. Leaned forward in her observation booth, her eyes wide with wonder. "Impossible," someone whispered behind her. "That blow should have shattered every bone in his body." "Humans are the most durable species in the galaxy for their size," said quietly. "Their bones are designed to bend rather than break. Their muscles can continue functioning even when heavily damaged. Their pain tolerance is among the highest ever recorded. Earth was a death world, full of predators and disasters. The beings who survived were the ones who could take damage and keep going." Stared at the human standing before him. The rage in his eyes was slowly being replaced by something else, something that might have been fear. "How?" demanded. "How are you still standing? That blow would kill most." Wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand. He rolled his damaged shoulder, wincing at the pain, but he did not fall. He did not run. He raised his fists again and faced the champion. "My grandfather used to hit me harder than that during training," said, and for the first time there was something like a smile on his face. "He said if I couldn't take pain, I had no business fighting." He moved forward, limping slightly but still moving, still dangerous. "What are you?" whispered. "What are humans?" "We're survivors." Eyes locked onto the champions. "We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We fought predators that were bigger than us. We survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that wiped out entire species. We crossed oceans and climbed mountains and went to places that should have been impossible for beings like us to reach. And we did all of it without scales, without claws, without 4 arms or natural armor." He was close now, close enough to strike again. "You want to know what humans are? We're the species that refuses to die. No matter how many times you knock us down, we get back up. No matter how badly you hurt us, we keep fighting. You've spent your whole life being untouchable, being unbeatable, but you've never faced something like us before." Attacked again, but his movements were slower now. Earlier strikes had damaged his nervous system, had disrupted the perfect coordination that made him so deadly. He swung with 3 arms instead of 4. His footwork was off. His attacks were predictable. Flowed through them like he had been doing it his whole life. Because in a way, he had. Every movement was something his grandfather had taught him. Every dodge was a technique that humans had developed over thousands of years. Every counterstrike was the result of generation after generation of martial artists, each one learning from the one before, building a system of combat that turned weakness into strength. The fight continued, but now everyone watching knew how it would end. The untouchable champion was slowing down. The weak human was speeding up. And somewhere in the observation booth, Doctor began writing the report that would change the galaxy's understanding of humanity forever. The fight ended not with a killing blow, but with silence. Lay on the arena floor, his golden eyes staring at the ceiling. His body would not respond to his commands. His arms would not move. His legs were numb. He could feel his heart's beating, could feel the air moving in and out of his lungs, but everything else was gone. The human had systematically destroyed his nervous system, one precise strike at a time, until the greatest warrior in the galaxy was reduced to a helpless creature unable to lift a finger. Stood over him, breathing hard. His left arm hung useless at his side. Blood covered his face and stained his white shirt red. He was exhausted, in more pain than he had ever felt in his life. But he was standing, and was not. The arena was completely silent. 50,000 beings sat frozen in their seats, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The screens showed the final moments of the fight on repeat, showing how a weak human had systematically dismantled the untouchable champion. The betting machines had crashed. The announcers had run out of words. Looked down at his fallen opponent. "Yield," he said quietly. Stared up at him. For 200 years he had been the greatest. For 847 fights he had been untouchable. And now, lying helpless on the floor of his own arena, he was being asked to say words he had never imagined speaking. "Why?" whispered. "Why don't you just kill me? That is the way of things. The victor kills the fallen. That is how legends are made." Shook his head slowly. "My grandfather taught me that killing is easy. Anyone can kill. It takes no skill, no discipline, no honor. Mercy is hard. Mercy requires strength." He reached down and offered his working hand to the fallen champion. "I didn't come here to kill you. I came here to stop you from hurting people who can't fight back." Stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then, in a voice that the entire arena could hear, he spoke. "I yield." The words echoed through the dome like thunder. For a moment nothing happened, and then slowly the crowd began to react. The silence turned to murmurs. The murmurs turned to voices. The voices turned to cheers. And within seconds the entire arena was on its feet, screaming, shouting, crying, celebrating. They were not just cheering for. They were cheering for the impossible. They were cheering for the little person who stood up to the giant. They were cheering for the proof that power was not everything, that strength was not the only thing that mattered. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor. They surrounded, working to repair the damage to his nervous system. They surrounded too, trying to treat his injuries, but he pushed them away gently. "There's someone I need to see first," he said. He walked slowly across the arena floor, every step sending pain shooting through his battered body. The crowd parted for him as he climbed into the stands. They reached out to touch him, to pat his shoulders, to thank him. But he kept walking until he found what he was looking for. Sat in the front row, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. Beside her was who was crying just as hard. Knelt in front of the elderly woman and took her hands in his. "I'm sorry I scared you," he said quietly, "but I couldn't let them hurt you." Pulled him into a hug, holding him like a grandmother holds her grandchild. "You stupid boy," she whispered through her tears. "You brave, stupid, wonderful boy." The days that followed changed everything. Doctor published her research paper 2 weeks later. It was titled The Hidden Strength of Humanity, a study of human combat potential. Within a month, it had been read by every military commander, every scientist, every leader in the galaxy. It explained what had seen in the arena that day, how humans were not weak but simply different, how their pattern recognition abilities were beyond anything other species could match, how their endurance and pain tolerance made them nearly impossible to stop, how their thousands of years of martial arts development had created fighting systems that could overcome any physical disadvantage. The paper changed how the galaxy saw humans. They were no longer the weak little beings from the death world. They were survivors, adapters, beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to win when they should not have been able to win. This restaurant became the most popular place on Horizon's Rest. Every day, beings from across the station came to eat her noodles and hear the story of the human who had beaten the untouchable champion, had to hire help, then more help, then even more. Within a year, she had the biggest restaurant on the station, and she never had to worry about money again. Started a business selling recordings of the fight. He made enough money to buy his own cargo ship, then another, then a whole fleet. He named his company 5 Blows Transport and painted the logo on every vessel, a human hand making a fist. Recovered from his injuries. The doctors were able to repair his nervous system, though he would never be quite as fast as he had been before. But something in him had changed. He had spent his whole life believing that strength was everything. Now he knew better. He retired from competitive fighting and opened a school, teaching young warriors that there was more to combat than power. And sometimes, late at night, he would watch the recording of his fight with and try to understand how he had been so wrong about so many things. As for he healed from his injuries and went back to his cargo ship. He did not want fame. He did not want money. He just wanted to fly his roots and live his quiet life. But the galaxy would not let him be forgotten. In bars and academies, on warships and frontier worlds, they told his story. The story of the cargo pilot who defended an old woman. The story of the human who faced the untouchable champion and landed 5 blows before the legend even knew the fight had begun. The story of the weak little being from the death world who proved that strength was not the only thing that mattered. A new saying spread among the stars, whispered by beings who had once thought humans were worthless. Never corner a human. They've spent 10,000 years learning how to win when they shouldn't. And somewhere in the outer rim, flying his cargo routes alone among the stars, smiled every time he heard those words. His grandfather would have been proud. The old man had always said that the best fighters were not the strongest or the fastest. They were the ones who understood that fighting was about more than just winning. It was about standing up for what was right. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. It was about proving that even the smallest person could make the biggest difference. Had spent years running from that lesson, but in the end he had learned it anyway. And the galaxy would never forget.